setting new standards in podcast excellence. You have joined the WBT, fully focused on business and taxes. Here is your host, Michael Lodge.
And welcome to the WBT. This is Michael Lodge. I have gotten hooked on this Netflix show called Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And it's with Seinfeld. And he gets these really classic cars, some not so classic, but he gets these classic cars and he picks up another comedian or one of his friends. And they drive around in this really classic car. Then they get a cup of coffee and they talk about life. And it's extremely funny because, one, Seinfeld's very funny. And he can come up with a quip very, very quickly. But the people that he surrounds himself with when he goes out on these rides are very funny. And so I've gotten really hooked on it because it makes me laugh. It makes me smile. And I love those kind of shows. But last night, I was watching his show. And they came on with he picked up one of his people in this car called a Gremlin. Now, I don't know if you remember that car, but it was a very dangerous car for people to drive. There were 3 cars that came out at about the same time. The Gremlin, the Vega, and the Pinto. One was by Ford, one was by Chevrolet. I can't remember who made the Gremlin. But they were very dangerous cars. Now, my dad, when I was young, he decided to go out and get me a car. And my dad was really good at trading. He loved to trade things with various people. So he decided to take one of his prized collectible guns and trade it for a car for me to drive. Because I was going to college at that time and I needed to go back and forth from home, which was from Spokane to Walla Walla, which was about probably 125 miles or something like that. It might have been a little bit longer, but I can't remember. It's been so long ago, back in the 70s. So he traded this prize gun and he got me a sports up model of the Vega. Now, in order to go any place with a Vega, you had to have at least 6 cans of oil in the back of your trunk because it ate more oil than it did gas. It had this aluminum engine on it, but they didn't make it that very well. And so my car did 2 things. One, it ate so much oil, but it also produced a lot of smoke in the back. So I was really excited. My dad brought this home, and I saw this red Vega, and it had mag wheels on it, and it really looked good for a Vega. Oh, excuse me. So I was so excited. I saw my dad pull this car up, and I was so excited because I thought, oh my gosh, now I'm going to be able to go to the places and really look cool. And so I ran out to the car to look at it, and I was walking around it until I got to the right front of the car, and it had nothing there. So here was this really nice body with really fresh paint, but until you got to the front of the car, and there was no right panel. But I thought, that's not going to stop me. It's a setback, but it's not going to stop me. Now, I grew up in Spokane, Washington. And Spokane, Washington has a street in downtown. When I was growing up, there was downtown called Riverside Avenue. Now, on Fridays and Saturday nights, that's where the kids would go down and cruise their car. And they would literally go up one side of Riverside, quickly turn around on the other side, and come back again. And that was where you were supposed to pick up chicks, not pick up guys. Well, let me tell you, I knew that I was going to be driving this Vega, but I was still going to go down there, and I was going to do Riverside Drive. But in order for me to do it, I was going to have to go in the far right lane so that people could not see my broken up old car in the front that had no front fender. But I did it anyway. And we would cruise and we'd go round and round and round. But I think people really knew that I didn't have a front fender because I never did pick up any chicks. Sad life. But that Vega didn't last very long. I think the Vega probably lasted a year and a half before it finally failed. And then my dad went out and took the Vega and he traded it for something else. And he brought me this 1957 Thunderbird. Now this car was this big, huge, monstrous boat. It was literally like a boat. And I thought, oh God, how am I going to cruise Riverside in this boat? Well, I did it anyway. In fact, that Thunderbird lasted me a long, long time. After I finished college, I finally went down to Portland, Oregon with it, and that's what I had as my transportation. So a good old Thunderbird did a lot of good for me. But even though when you have these setbacks, you can still achieve a lot of different things. You can still have this momentum to go forward no matter how bad the car looks or how bad the situation is. You can still make the most out of it. And that's what I did with every single car that I got. I think the very first new car that I got, I had driven all the way down to San Francisco, and I was going to work for the California CPA Foundation, right next to Stanford University at that time. I can still even remember the address was 1000 Welch Road. Now, they've moved since then, but I remember I would get the company bike, because they had a bike, and I would stroll into Stanford, and I would see everything. But I was still driving my old beat-up Thunderbird. Then finally I went out and bought my very first car. And I was so proud of that new car. I washed it every day. I did everything I could to it because I was finally proud that I had this brand new car. But in life, sometimes we have to go along with what we've got. We've got to use what we've got in order to move on to that next step, that next job, that next interview, that next meeting with a client, until finally we are able to take what we have done so very well with less and created a business. And that's when in 1984, I started my consulting practice. I had finally been able to move down to San Diego, California. And I started my consulting. And I took on those projects, as I've told you before. I took on those projects that no one else wanted to do. And I did them very well, without complaining. But I always remember back that I started in an old beat-up old Vega. I made a lot of friends with that Vega because it was always a conversational spot. People would see that Vega and they'd come up to it and then they'd see I had no right panel. And people would say, well, at least you've got a car. And you know what? I was very thankful for that car. Now, the Vega and the Pinto and the Gremlin had this really bad habit of if it got hit from the back, it would explode. So I had a lot of risk in traveling in those cars. I remember my sister got a Pinto, a brand new Pinto, and she thought she was cool because she had this brand new Pinto. But we all knew that if we got hit from the back, if someone rammed into the back, that our car could possibly explode. So here we were driving a car that was risky, just trying to get ahead, trying to get to school, trying to get to that job, trying to get to that consulting assignment. Sometimes you have to live with what you've got, but you've got to be creative. And sometimes you got to live with what you've got, and sometimes you have got to get out there and take on things that no one else wants to do in order to build a business. And I often think about that because even though I had that ugly old red or orange, I can't even remember what color it was, but it was god awful. But I still tried to make the best of things and be creative in how I presented myself. I had to create a storyline that would interest people, not in the car, but in me. And I've learned that process throughout my years, is that you have to be able to tell your story. And you've got to deal with what you've got. And so I often think that as I go through life, and when I was going to college, I worked in the janitorial department. And I became really good at it that they made me the supervisor of the janitorial department. And I've often thought that, you know what, if I couldn't do accounting anymore, I could still be a janitor. Because I know how to mop a floor, I know how to polish things up, I know how to be a janitor. So the point is that sometimes we go in life and we live with what we've got, but we become creative with what we've got. In our storyline, your storyline that you have to tell people, it's got to catch their interest within the first few minutes of telling it. And sometimes an old beat-up old Vega helps you tell your story. It begins the story, and you get to tell that individual what you're all about. It's amazing. I love it. Now, it's tax season, and we need to come up with a storyline. That's why you need to take a tax organizer, and you need to organize your tax story. Because your tax accountant wants to hear that tax story, and he wants to be able to do a very good tax return that is in compliance with state and federal laws. But he needs your story. So you need to organize it, and you need to get yourself a tax organizer that you can write everything down and be able to tell your tax accountant your story. What happened during that year. What's going to happen next year. Come up with your story. It's a tax story, and it's not that interesting, but you need to be able to do it. So if you don't have a tax organizer, I want you to go to my website at www.lodge-co.com. Click on Client Forums, and you'll see a tax organizer in there that can help you organize your tax story for your tax accountant. It's an easy process, but it has to be done. I say this almost every day to my clients and to my friends and whoever will listen to me. The better organized that you are, the more in compliance you will be. Because if IRS or state ever come to ask you a question, you know what your story is. Now, of course, I suggest that you use your tax accountant to be your go-between between you and the IRS or the state. But at least both of you, because since you were able to tell a good story and that you have backed it up with documentation, that you'll probably fare off very well. So this is Mike Lodge for the WBT. If you have any questions, just send me an email at mlodge, M-L-O-D-G-E, at lodge, L-O-D-G-E-CO.com, and I will respond to you. So everybody go out there. You may have a Vega, you may have to live within the circumstances or what you've got right now, but you can develop a very good story. This is Mike Lodge for the WBT. I will talk with you soon.
Thank you for listening to the WBT with Michael Lodge. Join us again tomorrow as we explore more about business and taxes. Follow us on iHeartRadio and go to our podcast website at www.wbtpod.com and listen to all of our podcasts and read our blogs.
World of Business and Taxes on WBT.
This is brought to you by Lodge & Co., a business and tax advisory firm where your success is our goal. Call us today toll-free at 888-681-1518 or visit us at www.lodge-co.com and learn more about what we can do for you. Lodge & Co., your source for sound business and tax services.